Okay, welcome again for our today's lecture in hydrology course. Today's lecture is about evaporation and also evapotranspiration. And let's start with definition of evapotranspiration. As we already discussed in the first chapter of our lecture, evapotranspiration is the combination of evaporation and transpiration. We know that evaporation can occur from open water surfaces, from the soil, topsoil, and from vegetation surface like you see here. Evaporation from open water can be like from evaporation from lakes, from rivers, from canals, from reservoirs, from the pool of your home, and any other water bodies. And evaporation from soil, you know, when we irrigate soil in order to have agricultural activities on soil, or after rainfall events, after precipitation events, we have moisture on soil, and this moisture can be evaporated as a result of heat and solar energy. And also after rain, we have some water remaining after rain, or in some seasons, we have some water molecules remaining on plants, like these water droplets on the leaf of plants, or even on the stem trunk of trees. So this kind of water can be evaporated, and it is also a part of evaporation. Arda, you can turn off your camera, please. I requested all the students to turn off the cameras. Thank you.
Okay, teacher, thank you.
So if we have transformation of water from body of plant, from plant tissues to the atmosphere, it is called transpiration. Therefore, plants contribute to the process of transpiration, and if we add this all together, it is called evapotranspiration. Okay. So here we review again these two definitions of evaporation and transpiration. Evaporation is the vaporization of liquid water through the absorption of heat. Solar energy derives evaporation of water from oceans, lakes, moisture in the soil, and other surface of water. In hydrology, evaporation estimation is divided into two categories: evaporation from open water surface and evaporation from land. You know why it is important for us as a civil engineering, especially for the case of open water surfaces like reservoirs. Our aim is to collect and store water in a safe place to use in seasons that we have no rain or we have less water amount. So one of the main important goals when we construct a dam, a reservoir, we need the total amount of water that is stored in the reservoir. But through the evaporation, especially in hot seasons, in summer we might lose significant amount of water that we already stored in reservoirs. So we should think about how we control the rate of evaporation in our reservoirs. The same condition we have in irrigation canals, especially in long canals. And also irrigation from the surface, from land, evaporation from land is important for in terms of agricultural activities. You know, an optimum amount of moisture should be in soil, like you see here, and this water can go to the root zone of the plants in order to provide required water for the growth of plants. So when we have less amount of moisture in the soil, therefore we have some stress on the agricultural activities. Therefore, it should be control. It should be under the control of the agricultural engineers. How much water or what is the amount of water content in land. Transpiration, as I told, is the process of water movement through the plants. As I told, to plants' tissues. It's evaporation from aerial parts such as leaves, stems, and flowers. And also there, sometimes those area is called stomata. I don't have more definition in the next slide, so let's talk a bit more. You know, especially leaves are the main part of plants that do the photosynthesis process, and continuously there is transformation of water from leaves to atmosphere through those stomata, and this is a part of hydrological cycle that we have to consider it, because its amount is significant, and sometimes especially in the growing season, the amount of transpiration can be more than amount of evaporation from the land and water bodies in agricultural areas, in jungles. Therefore, it should be calculated. And once we calculate, calculation of transpiration individually is a difficult task in hydrology, and generally both evaporation and transpiration calculate integratedly, and this is why we have the term evapotranspiration. How we calculate it, this is the topic for today's lecture. What is difference between boiling? Yeah, let's have a quick review about the boiling to make a definite or certain distinguish between the process of boiling and evaporation. You know, evaporation occurs on the surface of the liquid, whereas boiling occurs at the entire length of liquid. Number two, boiling occurs rapidly, whereas evaporation process occurs slowly. A very slow process is evaporation comparing to boiling. Evaporation occurs at any temperature, whereas boiling occurs at specific temperature. You know, for example, you don't have evaporation on the surface of both are still boiling until you have the temperature 100 degrees. The motion of the particles is fast in boiling, whereas in evaporation, few particles move slowly and few at a faster rate. And finally, there is a formation of bubbles in boiling, but bubbles are not seen in evaporation. Okay. So let's continue with the definition of evapotranspiration and the methods that we can apply to calculate evapotranspiration. Apart from the water availability in the topsoil, the evaporation from a cropland, cropped soil is mainly determined by the fraction of the solar radiation reaching the soil surface. This fraction decreases over the growing period as the crop develops and the crop canopy shades more and more of the ground area. When the crop is small, water is predominantly lost by soil evaporation, but once the crop is well developed and completely covers the soil, transpiration becomes the main process. You see, transpiration is not only a factor of the type or kind of plant, it is the factor also of the time. And a same plant, due to the process of growing, can generate different amount of the transpiration. Therefore, we need some approximations when we are going to calculate evapotranspiration. In this here, we understood that the main factor for evapotranspiration is solar radiation that reaches to the soil or plants. There are other climatic factors that we will study in the following slides. Evaporation and transpiration occur simultaneously, and there is no easy way to distinguishing between the two processes. Factors affecting evaporation and evapotranspiration with a reference to related ET. Okay, from now I can use ET instead of evapotranspiration, okay? Here you see different definitions for evapotranspiration. First of all, we have ET0 or ETO. It is called reference evapotranspiration. ETO is a reference transpiration, evapotranspiration. You see, when we only consider weather parameters like solar radiation, can you guess what? Can you guess any other weather parameter that influence on the amount of evapotranspiration other than solar radiation? Yeah, this definitely you have heard about the impact of wind speed, for example, or impact of humidity, impact of also temperature on evapotranspiration. You know, when we have evapotranspiration or transpiration, a layer of vaporized or vapor gas surrounds the plant, and without wind, the air above the plant is saturated with water. Therefore, it cannot be, the process of transpiration cannot be continued. But when winds come, the dry air the wet air is replaced with dry air. Therefore, there is still capacity in the air to absorb more water from the plant. So wind is also important, and the other weather parameters that I mentioned. So if we only consider weather parameters, it is called reference evapotranspiration, and this is the simplest kind of ET that we can calculate. But our aim is to include the contribution of plants, therefore, in the amount of ET. Therefore, we can consider different crop characteristics to adjust the value of ET. Therefore, we can call it crop evapotranspiration, and ETC denotes crop evapotranspiration. And you know, crop, as I told, there are different factors affecting on the crop. You know, in some seasons we have irrigation, external or man-made irrigation. We have some management works. We sometimes do some agricultural activities on lands. We, for example, use pesticides. We and try to manage our the cultivation process, and therefore it could be different patterns on growing land. For example, we have fully covered area with standard size of a plant, but sometimes we have mismanagement in irrigation, mismanagement in controlling our activities, agricultural activities. Therefore, the rate or the size of plants, their amount on land can be different. Therefore, there is another factor that should be considered to adjust the ETC. If we consider those factors, I will talk more about those factors in the next slides, we can achieve adjusted ETC, each of which are important from different perspective. Okay, let's see how evapotranspiration is defined by FAO, Food and Agricultural Organization. On land, evapotranspiration is a combination of evaporation from the soil surface and transpiration from vegetation. We already talked about it. And about weather climate effects, you see, in addition to energy, which is mainly from solar radiation and wind, comes by solar radiation, and vapor transport, the availability of soil water and vegetation cover are also important, yes. So we say that, okay, we have solar radiation and we have land, and it could be evapotranspiration or evaporation on land. Let's say on land, for example. However, there is a limited value of moisture, limited moisture in soil. Therefore, what we expect from evaporation from soil could be less than the real evaporation because there is a limited available moisture in the soil. Because of this, FAO defines another kind of evapotranspiration, which is called potential evapotranspiration. What is the exact definition? When water availability is not a limiting factor, evapotranspiration reaches its full potential, which is called potential evapotranspiration and is shown by PET. So when we have no limitation in terms of water availability, evaporation can reach to its maximum, evapotranspiration can reach to its maximum value. In that case, we call it is PET or potential evapotranspiration. In practice, a value for PET is calculated at a local climate station on a reference surface. Reference surface means a surface having a reference kind of vegetation, and therefore, you know, for different type of vegetation, we should provide different. We should calculate different PET. Okay, let's go to the details of this figure. And for the term of energy, we have solar radiation. Wind is also another weather climate that affects on evapotranspiration. Vapor transport helps to move vapor away from water surface. Yeah, vapor transport. In addition to energy and vapor transport, the availability of soil water, I talked about it. Presence of gradient of concentration between water surface and surrounding area. I talked a bit about this issue also. When we have transpiration around a leaf, for example, The surrounding air can be saturated, therefore without having gradient of concentration of humidity, okay, we can the evaporation, the transpiration process will stop. Therefore, humidity is important, humidity of the air. Low humidity will result in higher transpiration. And also temperature, you know, this is another factor that by increasing temperature, the amount of evaporation and transpiration is expected to be increased. Okay, here we summarize those weather parameters, crop factors, and management and environmental conditions. You already know that if we calculate ET with respect to only weather parameters, it is called reference evapotranspiration, ET0. And let's see what are those weather parameters. The principal weather parameters affecting evapotranspiration are radiation, air temperature, humidity, and wind speed. Several procedures have been developed to assess the evaporation rate from these parameters. The evaporation power of the atmosphere is expressed by the reference crop evapotranspiration or reference evapotranspiration. The reference crop evapotranspiration represents the evapotranspiration from standardized vegetated surface. Okay, what is standard vegetated surface? I will talk a bit more in the next slide. Crop factors, the crop type, variety, and development stage should be considered when assessing the evapotranspiration from crops grown in large, well-managed fields. Differences in resistance to transpiration, crop height, crop roughness, reflection, ground cover, and crop rooting characteristics result in different ETL levels in different types of crops under identical environment condition. Crop evapotranspiration under standard condition, ETC, okay? Standard condition means standard size of crop, okay? And standard vegetated area refers to evaporating demand from crops that are grown in large fields under optimum soil water, excellent management and environmental condition, and achieve full production under the given climatic conditions. When you calculate ETC, as I told you, consider crop factors. But here you see that when we consider only crop factors, we assume there is excellent management and environmental conditions. However, sometimes management and environmental condition is not excellent. Therefore, we have to adjust ETC by a sort of other factors. Let's see what are those factors: management and environmental conditions. Factors such as soil salinity, poor land fertility, limited application of fertilizers, the presence of hard or impenetrable soil horizons, the absence of control of disease and pests, and poor soil management may limit the crop development and reduce the evapotranspiration. Yeah. When you have limited development, limited growth in the crop, the rate of evapotranspiration should be less than ETC that you already calculated for standard crop vegetated area and excellent management environment. Okay, so far we talk about the standards and theory behind the calculations. Now let's see how we can apply those definitions to find ET in reality. As I told, the first type of ET is reference evapotranspiration, in which we consider only climate or weather factors. These four important factors are written here, and grass reference crop. This is, for example, well-watered grass crop. For example, in this figure, you see Saint Augustine grass with a standard size that is calculated, for example, to calculate ET0 from a land with such a surface. Okay. So we have ET0, for example, for this kind of land. But in some cases, there are other factors, growing season, less, for example, or some other factors that affect and change the standard land. My God. What we do in that case, we should multiply the correction factor of Kc to ET0 to find the ETC. Okay? Sorry. And once we have ETC, we can again multiply the value of ETC with another factor, which is called Ks, to adjust it with respect to the environmental activities. So either you can multiply ETC with the Ks, or you can multiply ET0 with Kc and Ks. Sorry. Okay, any questions so far? Okay, let's go to another questions. Here I told, let's assume that we have ET0, okay, with respect to these factors and a standard grass reference crop. Still, we do not know how we can find ET0. Actually, to calculate the reference evapotranspiration, we use pan evaporation